The Venezuela strike wasn't the main event. Operation Absolute Resolve, that surgical demolition of Maduro's military infrastructure, was a stress test. Washington wanted to see how fast it could move, how hard it could hit, and who would blink first. Russia didn't intervene. China issued a statement so mild it might as well have been a birthday card. And in that silence, in that calculated non-response, the Pentagon learned everything it needed to know. Within 72 hours, Trump was on stage talking about Greenland again. Not as a joke, not as a negotiating tactic, as a declared objective. You think that's coincidence? You think the timing is random? The chessboard just flipped. The Arctic isn't the future theater, it's the current one. And Greenland is the queen everyone's been ignoring while they stared at pawns in the Middle East. Venezuela was never about Venezuela. It was about testing the new rules. The strike packages that hit military installations around Caracas were designed to send a message. America can reach anywhere, anytime, and the old diplomatic theater is dead. But here's what they don't tell you on cable news. The real value of that operation wasn't tactical, it was strategic reconnaissance. Washington was measuring response times. They were watching how fast Russian mercenaries evacuated. They were tracking Chinese diplomatic cables. They were testing whether the post-Ukraine world order still had any teeth, or if everyone was too exhausted, too broke, too internally fractured to care about another hemisphere's problems. The answer came back clean. Nobody moved. Nobody cared enough to escalate. And that green light, that beautiful silent confirmation that the global powers are too stretched to open another front, that's when Greenland stopped being a negotiation and became an operation. You saw the press conferences. You saw Trump talking about absolute necessity and national security. You probably rolled your eyes. You probably thought it was another distraction, another headline designed to keep you angry and engaged. But zoom out. Look at the pattern. The same week Venezuela gets hit, Greenland dominates every security briefing. The same week China stays quiet, the US starts openly discussing acquisition terms with Denmark. This isn't diplomacy. This is a smash and grab during a fire sale. The connection is simple. America needed to know it could act unilaterally without triggering a cascade. Venezuela proved it could. Now it's moving on the prize it's wanted for over 150 years. And that prize isn't just ice. It's the control point for the entire Northern Hemisphere's nuclear kill chain, the mineral vault that powers every advanced weapon system in the Western arsenal, and the geographic choke point that decides whether Russian submarines can threaten the eastern seaboard. Greenland isn't real estate. It's the skeleton key to the 21st century great power competition. And the window to take it just opened. William Seward didn't just buy Alaska. He tried to buy Greenland the same year, 1867. Most people know him as the guy who bought Seward's icebox, that frozen wasteland everyone mocked until they found gold, then oil, then realized it was the buffer between Russia and North America. But Seward's vision didn't stop at Alaska. He knew the Arctic wasn't empty space, it was the highway. He knew that whoever controlled the northern passages controlled the fastest routes between continents, the surveillance points for naval movements, and the high ground for any future conflict. Denmark laughed him off. The US was still stitching itself back together after the Civil War. Nobody took the offer seriously. Fast forward to 1946. World War II just ended. The Pentagon is drawing up plans for the next one. They offered Denmark $100 million for Greenland. That's about $1.4 billion in today's money. Denmark says no again. But here's the thing. The US didn't walk away. They just changed tactics. If you can't buy it, lease it. Thule Air Base gets established in 1951. It's still there. 70-plus years of uninterrupted American military presence on Greenlandic soil, running radar systems that track every object entering the Arctic airspace, maintaining ballistic missile early warning systems that give the US those critical 18 minutes of heads up before an ICBM crosses into American territory. Thule isn't a base, it's a tripwire. It's the sensor that keeps Washington from getting surprised by a nuclear-first strike. But the base was never enough. Every strategic document since the 50s mentions Greenland as essential or critical to North American defense. The language never softens. Every decade, some analyst writes another paper explaining why the US can't afford to let Greenland fall into hostile hands. Because Greenland isn't just an island, it's an unsinkable aircraft carrier parked between two oceans, capable of projecting power across the entire North Atlantic, monitoring submarine traffic through the only deep-water routes that matter, and serving as the forward operating position for any Arctic conflict. You can't move a carrier group this far north. The ice tears hulls apart. But Greenland doesn't move. It just sits there, permanent, immovable, perfectly positioned. It's the one piece of military infrastructure that can't be sunk, can't be repositioned, and can't be neutralized without triggering a nuclear response. The obsession isn't new, it's old. What's new is the willingness to act on it. For decades, the US played nice because Denmark was NATO. You don't bully your allies in public. But the rules changed. NATO is fracturing. Germany is rearming. France is making independent plays in Africa. Poland is building its own defense corridor. The alliance isn't dead, but it's not the unshakable bloc it pretended to be. And when alliances weaken, opportunities open up. Greenland is that opportunity. The Danes know it. The Greenlanders know it, and Washington knows they know. That's why the conversation shifted from if to how much. The only question left is whether Denmark takes the check or watches America find another way in. Here's a geography lesson they don't teach in schools. Between Greenland and Scotland, there's a line of water called the GIUK Gap. Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. It's the only deep water route Russian submarines can use to reach the Atlantic without surfacing or traveling through easily monitored choke points. If you're a Russian naval commander and you want to position your boomers, your nuclear missile submarines, within striking range of the American East Coast, you go through the GIUK Gap. There's no other option. The Arctic routes are too shallow, the Norwegian Sea is too monitored, the Baltic is a NATO bathtub. The gap is the only door. And the US has been guarding that door since the Cold War. The seafloor along the GIUK Gap is laced with SOS-US arrays, sound surveillance system, thousands of hydrophones, underwater microphones, listening for the acoustic signature of submarine propellers. Every vessel that passes through gets logged, tracked, and if necessary, shadowed by attack subs until it's no longer a threat. This isn't theoretical. This is active, ongoing, every single day. Russian subs still try to slip through. American subs still hunt them. The Cold War never ended underwater. It just got quieter. Greenland is the western anchor of this system. Without Greenland, the gap is just open ocean. With Greenland, it's a monitored checkpoint. The bases on Greenland's eastern coast feed real-time data into the network. Maritime patrol aircraft launch from Thule and run search grids over the Denmark Strait. Surface vessels operate out of Greenlandic waters to maintain a persistent presence. Lose Greenland and you lose the ability to close the door. Russian subs get a free pass into the Atlantic. They can position within 2,000 miles of New York, Washington, Norfolk. They can sit quietly on the continental shelf and wait for the order. And the US gets maybe 15 minutes of warning instead of the current system that tracks them from the moment they leave port. This is why the Pentagon doesn't joke about Greenland. This is why every wargame that involves a strategic nuclear exchange includes Greenland as a critical variable. If the US controls Greenland, it controls the gap. If it controls the gap, it controls the Atlantic. If it controls the Atlantic, it keeps Russian nuclear forces boxed in the Arctic and the Barents Sea, where they can be monitored, countered, and, if necessary, destroyed before they become a threat. This isn't about invasion. This is about maintaining the sensor grid that prevents a decapitation strike. This is about keeping the nuclear chessboard in a configuration where the US always sees the move coming. And here's the kicker. China is building icebreakers, lots of them. More than the US, more than Russia. They're not building them for fun. They're building them because the Arctic routes are opening, and whoever controls the northern passages controls the shortest shipping lanes between Asia and Europe, cutting 10 days off current routes, saving billions in fuel and time. But those routes go through the same choke points, and if China gets a foothold in Greenland, if they build a deep water port, if they establish a research station that's actually a signals intelligence facility, then the GIUK Gap becomes contested. The US loses its monopoly on the Atlantic's backdoor, and every strategic assumption that's kept the nuclear balance stable for 70 years goes out the window. That's the nightmare scenario. That's why Greenland isn't optional anymore.
Let's talk about the periodic table. Specifically, let's talk about neodymium and dysprosium. If those names sound like sci-fi elements, that's because most people have never heard of them. But they're inside every precision-guided missile, every fighter jet's targeting system, every electric vehicle motor, every wind turbine, every smartphone, every piece of advanced electronics that makes modern life and modern warfare possible. They're rare earth elements, and China controls 90% of global production. Not because the deposits only exist in China, they exist everywhere, but because refining rare earths is dirty, toxic, environmentally catastrophic work, and China was willing to do it while everyone else outsourced the problem. Now it's a weapon. China doesn't need to fire a shot. They just threaten export controls. They hint at supply chain disruptions, and every defense contractor in the West starts sweating because their entire production line depends on materials that flow through Chinese hands. The Pentagon is acutely aware of this. They've been funding alternative sources for years. They've been stockpiling where possible. But stockpiles run out, and alternative sources take decades to develop, unless you already have the deposits and just need to start mining. Enter Greenland, specifically the Kvanefjeld site in southern Greenland. It's one of the largest rare earth deposits on the planet. Estimates put it at over $1 trillion in total value, depending on commodity prices. The site contains significant concentrations of the exact elements the US needs to break dependence on China. Neodymium for permanent magnets, dysprosium for high-temperature applications, yttrium for lasers and phosphors, all the ingredients for autonomous drones, hypersonic guidance systems, advanced radar, and every other piece of tech that keeps the American military a generation ahead of its competitors. But here's the complication. Kvanefjeld also contains uranium. A lot of it, enough that mining the rare earths means dealing with radioactive tailings, contaminated water, and all the political fallout that comes with nuclear materials in a territory that's trying to assert its environmental credentials. Greenland's government has been hesitant. Environmental groups are loudly opposed. The optics are terrible. But the US doesn't care about optics anymore. It cares about supply chains, and when the choice is between bad optics and strategic vulnerability, Washington picks the former every time. China knows this. That's why they've been investing in Greenlandic mining projects for over a decade. They've offered development loans. They've funded infrastructure. They've positioned themselves as the friendly partner willing to bring cash and jobs without the colonial baggage. It's the same playbook they used in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in the Pacific Islands. Offer money, build ports, gain influence, wait for the dependency to mature, then leverage it when it matters. Greenland is already halfway into that trap. The Kvanefjeld project has Chinese investors circling. If they get a controlling stake, the US loses access to the one major rare earth deposit outside Beijing's control. That's unacceptable. So the US is now racing to outbid, outinvest, or simply acquire the entire territory to lock down the vault. The numbers are staggering. Greenland's GDP is around $3 billion. The Kvanefjeld deposit alone is worth more than 300 times that. It's not an economy, it's a treasure chest sitting in the ice, waiting for someone to claim it. And the US just realized it can't wait any longer. Every year, China refines more rare earths. Every year, their monopoly tightens. Every year, the dependency deepens. Greenland is the escape hatch, and the window to secure it is closing.